wanted to ask you about, how you feel about Smash 4 right now. Competitive landscape's in a bit of a mess. Tiers are in a bit of a mess. What do you think about the game right now? How do you feel about it?
I think it's great just because so many people don't know who essentially can win, and I think that's just exciting for everyone. For a long time, everyone thought, Zero's just gonna win everything, and he hasn't won the last few majors he's been to. So it's very, very refreshing, as well as the tier list and everything. I also think it just shows how balanced the game is, where we don't know who the worst character is and who the best one is.
So I want to ask you kind of what you think of Fox right now, because early on people were maybe sleeping on him, but with tiers getting shuffled in terms of patches and nerfs, he's been relatively untouched, but he's just sort of been climbing, in terms of strength and performances. Why do you think that is? And is it really just your performance?
I think Fox in general is a very, very strong character. I think at the moment that he could be top 5, and it just shows with me progressing with the character as a player. So I'm able to, in a sense, translate my skills into the character and just show how great he can be.
You mentioned that he's in that top 5. Who do you think is top 5? No particular order, just who you think might be there.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah.
I'd say for sure Cloud. Also, I'd say Sheik Steel, Rosalina, and probably Sonic.
So who do you find is a tougher matchup for Fox? I think a lot of people don't necessarily think too much about his matchup spread, and so because he has a pretty decent one at a high level. So who do you find that he has trouble with?
I think Cloud's difficult. Kirby, which a lot of people would be surprised to hear, is very difficult. Same with Luigi, Rosalina. Sheik as well is still pretty difficult, but all of them are still very winnable. It's just they give him more trouble than the other casts.
Yeah, I can feel Kirby because that's what I pick when my brother goes Fox. So I have a bit of that knowledge. So something that's been a really big deal lately has been, people have been talking about how counterpicking has been working as a great strategy lately for a lot of players. Is that something that you think works? Is it something that you even want to explore?
Oh, most definitely. I explore it. I still have my DK for counterpicks, as well as Mario and a few other characters that I can use if need be. Especially, I also say that it's not a lot of character counterpicks, but more so players. There's some players that struggle against certain characters or playstyles, so why not take that to your advantage, especially if you have a character that they struggle in.
So speaking of which, and speaking of your DK, is DK that kind of thing? Is it more of you don't know how to play against DK, so I'm going to bust this out, and you just don't know what's happening here, regardless of tier lists?
Kind of can be, just because DK has a handful of good gimmicks, and if you're not used to them, they're very, very devastating. That could be the end of a stock. Devastating.
And I know you pulled him out a couple times, and you definitely pulled him out a couple times as CEO. How often do you find yourself going to DK as that kind of matchup-oriented, knowledge-oriented counterpick?
More so matchups lately. I'd say I pulled him out against Abadongo, took a round, and I also used him against Void because Sheik DK is surprisingly not as bad as a lot of people think. He just takes a ton of damage and then can take a stock at 60% for one grab, so it's really good.
Is there any specific kind of prep you do for EVO? Is it just regular practice? What does EVO practice look like?
I just play the game, maybe look up a few matches or players that I would say could give me trouble, get my bracket, things like that. So, a lot of people can say that they take EVO more serious than the other events, but I would say I don't. I just try to focus or take it as if it's another event, because there's always going to be another big event. So if I put so much pressure on myself at this event, it'll kind of just offset the other ones, if that makes sense.
So speaking of practice, obviously you've been performing very well recently. What do you see as next for you as a player, advancing? What do you see as the next step for you getting better as a player?
Winning a national. Yeah.
What about from a practice? Anything you want to be able to pick up? Is there something you want to affect in your mental state, in your play style? Is there something you want to change there at all?
Something I need to work on, which I still have trouble with, is playing more patiently. There's a lot of situations where I'm if I just waited a little bit longer, I wouldn't have been in such a bad situation compared to what I am in now. So definitely that.
Okay. And speaking of that kind of mind state, working on stuff, this is, biggest Smash tournament of all time, biggest Smash 4 tournament of all time, biggest EVO ever. It's probably a lot of people's first time competing at a huge tournament like this, and probably even more will be like that next year. What's your advice to players who this is their first tournament, or maybe next year's their first tournament, where their first big big event is EVO where they're competing? What would you say to that kind of player?
I would just make sure that they always keep in mind there's always going to be another big event, and don't put so much pressure on themselves, because at my first national, that's what happened to me, and I did horribly because of it. So it's just a learning process. Just knowing that, of course, everyone wants to do really well at this event, but there's always another event you can prove yourself in and do well in. So if you have that mindset, it just makes it a lot easier to play well, just because you don't have so much pressure on yourself.